just a girl. Not a threat.
Oh, Ellie. I think they should be terrified of you.
Please welcome Lucy O'Brien.
Hello, everyone.
It's those brains.
Welcome.
Guys.
I just want to thank you all
brains
so
are
much
taller.
for a closer look at The Last of Us Part 2. Now, obviously, we saw that incredible demo at Sony's showcase last night, but if you are anything like me, you want to sit Naughty Dog down and pick their brains until they are hollow husks for more details. And that is what we are going to do, hopefully, this morning. Now, I would love to introduce our guests from Naughty Dog, Neil Druckmann, writer and director. Welcome, Neil. And co-game directors Anthony Newman and Kurt Margenau. Welcome, welcome, guys. Now, how do you feel after last night?
Pretty incredible. The response was awesome. Really excited about it.
Yeah, it's a big run-up to put this demo together, like all these different disciplines, like work in different facets, different elements of this demo, and we're all working very hard. Teams working very hard, so they have it out there. Like a bunch of Naughty Dogs came out to see it, and like with that church that Sony built for us.
The church was amazing.
It was a pretty incredible experience.
Does hungover count as how I feel?
Let's rewind a little bit. So The Last of Us Part 2 was first announced PSX 2016.
That sounds right.
That sounds right. And then obviously we got that amazing cinematic at Paris Games Week last year, which was basically showing off the brutality of this world. And then last night we got our first look at gameplay. So, I mean, what did you want to convey to the audience with the demo you showed last night? What was your primary sort of message there?
Well, first, we
The
really
what?
obviously wanted to show off the new things that we're doing with gameplay. So we have like a ton of new mechanics
On
that we're
them, you
super
mean?
excited about in terms of traversal, like jumping over gaps and squeezing through shelves and stuff, the new prone moveset that Ellie has, all the new melee features that we have. But in addition, I think what we're trying to do with every kind of taste of the game that we're revealing is kind of create an arc that runs parallel to the game, like kind of a narrative by way of like what we're revealing, that everything is like kind of an additional piece of the puzzle. So the enemies that Ellie's facing in this demo are the same enemies that you saw in the Paris trailer and stuff. So there's kind of a connection that's running through everything.
And, let's talk about gameplay, because this is what we saw last night. What's been your primary philosophy behind gameplay in the sequel?
I mean, it's about tension. Like, that's what The Last of Us is. So when we are thinking to expand on, the great core set of mechanics that The Last of Us had, we're thinking about how do we make Ellie feel like she's more connected with the environment, being able to squeeze under things, being able to squeeze through things, and just interacting with the environment in a way that feels more realistic, more human, more like when you see grass, I can hide in it, kind of. And with the AI, with the way that the AI kind of redid the searching and the way they talk to each other, call each other by name, just bringing up the level of fidelity and realism so that the enemies don't just feel like video game enemies, they're like real people that communicate.
Yeah, and the greater the threat is, and by advancing the AI the way we have, and making them human, the way like they reference each other by name, as you see in the demo, that's like a new tech that we developed for this game. We're increasing the desperation and the obsession that Ellie has to pursue this goal. So all the systems are working in concert to put you in alignment with Ellie on this kind of what we're hoping is going to be a very, very intense journey.
Now, we played as Ellie a little bit in the original. Then we played as her
Spoiler.
a lot in Left Behind. Are we basically going to see the sort of similar gameplay as Left Behind? Is it going to feel like Left Behind, or are you tailoring it even further
We're expanding things a lot. So one thing that's like really been driving us is we get inspired by sequels that kind of don't play it safe, that take risks with the mechanics and really try to like take things to the next level and expand things. So the game is centered on Ellie, but just in general, everything from stealth to live combat, crafting, every system, traversal is kind of taken to the next level. So even though you're playing this character that you know and love, she's picked up a lot of new tricks in the 5 years since The Last of Us Part 1. And yeah, I think it's going to be a really new experience for people. There's going to be a lot more options for them as they play this new Ellie.
Yeah, I think we've done and Left Behind is we had 2 timelines that we were playing with and kind of jumping back and forth, and that's something that is an intriguing way to tell a story. And at least in this demo, you're seeing 2 times and where the story takes place, and maybe that expands further.
Let's, so cryptic, Neil, as always. Let's talk about combat. How has combat evolved since the original?
A lot of people noticed in the demo online, I saw where it's like, oh, look, can you dodge? So yeah, you can dodge. That is like a core part of the melee now. So it's like part of the goal was to have deeper engagements with enemies, being able to fight two-on-one or multiple enemies at the same time, and having that extra ability to move and react and all these contextual dodges and animations and planting off of surfaces and attacking and like, yeah, great finishers. I'm sure you could speak to the melee designer on Last of Us 1, Anthony Newman.
Yeah, I mean, you pretty much said it all already, but I think in terms of combat in general, we're looking for a lot more options for the player. Like, when you feel like you're kind of really in this situation with these like very realistic humans hunting you down that you have to overcome, I think it puts you like in Ellie's place and makes you feel this tension. And our goal is to kind of create a lot of opportunities for creative play, for taking down these enemies of like, oh, could I potentially hide under this car? What's that going to get me? And you kind of are able to create these like kind of emergent moments of interplay between your own abilities and the abilities of the AI. And it creates, for honestly, some really exciting moments.
And a lot of the new mechanics, even though they might seem simple on paper, they really afford much wider, more complex layouts that the player can play with as Ellie. So crawling, for example, now opens up all these crawl spaces and places you can hide and places where you can go in grass. And we have a stealth mechanic that's analog stealth. So when you're in grass, you're never completely hidden. It depends on what your stance is and how thick the grass is. Likewise, we now have a jump button. So just having like first Last of Us didn't have a jump. Now we have a jump, so we can get much more vertical with our combat spaces. So the combat becomes much more dynamic, which leans into Ellie being, she's smaller than Joel. She's not as physically opposing. So she needs all these different ways to overcome her opposition in ways that he couldn't.
So we can see less ladders this time around. Now we've got a jump button, or
Can't comment on the ladder situation.
No comment on ladders or pallets.
We've mentioned tension. Obviously, The Last of Us kind of felt at times like a survival horror game because of the scarcity of resources. Is that going to be a returning feature where you kind of have to scramble and make do with what you've got?
Yeah, absolutely. And that kind of leads into the crafting, and we're rethinking our weapon upgrades and player upgrades things. When we thought about crafting and how we evolve it for the next game, we didn't want to just like add a million things to craft. We want those decisions to be important when whatever resources you have, that trade-off of the Molotov or the health kit from Last of Us 1 is a core tenet of the combat and the moment-to-moment. So we wanted to have more of those choices and kind of expand where it made sense. So yeah, we have like different ammo types for the arrow, for example. The exploding arrow is a new feature. So yeah, that's kind of our philosophy with the crafting.
In terms of tension, I think the kind of catchphrase we always would use with The Last of Us, which I think is accurate, is survival action. And I think what's really cool about the formula of the game is these moments of like extreme foreboding and tension that kind of explode into action, like the 2 versus 1 melee, where it's like, oh, it's really crazy for a second, and then you get overwhelmed, then you hide again. So it's kind of this cocktail of like pretty intense frenetic action. I think like being able to jump and like squeeze through stuff, and the dodge, like all of that stuff adds to kind of that frenetic moment. And then the prone and all the stealth options kind of add to the tension moment.
Well, I want to talk a little bit more about stealth. Tell me what we should expect from sort of traversal through this world.
Basically, obviously, like we've been mentioning, Ellie's got a bunch of new traversal options that neither she nor Joel had in the first game. So one thing, again, like all these things sound small, but when you actually play these setups, like it's amazing the options that it gives you. So being able to squeeze through tight gaps and kind of get quick flanks on your opponents, it's such a cool option to be able to kind of integrate into your combat experience. And obviously, prone's another big thing. So hiding in crawl spaces, we have this incredibly lush and like beautiful naturalistic world. So being able to integrate the vegetation into hiding from your enemies and kind of keeping to the shadows and stuff, it's again a really cool option to have for the player.
And you know, Naughty Dog has a lot of experience. We learn a lot over the years making Uncharted. So just the fidelity of animation and what the animation team, which is so incredible, is able to achieve in this game. We completely redid our animation core movement player animation system for this game, just so we could get this more fluid feeling and being able to do all these things. We're talking about traversal, jump, running, all these things, and having it, hopefully if you see the demo, you feel like it's just so seamless, and that is such a big part of the way we make our games, that it never feels like a game. It just feels like I'm running and jumping over a thing, and that's how a person would do it.
And that's for Ellie and the enemies you face. They're using this animation system as well, so you're not seeing transitions from state to state. You're seeing someone that feels more like a human, and they come in and they check with each other and they move around more like real people, which again raises the threat for you.
Let's talk about this lush environment, which we saw a little bit of last night. When we talk about scope, what are we talking about? Like, how big is this game? How big are these landscapes?
How big is
I
this
know
game?
you love this question.
Pretty big.
It's a really big game, and it's looking like it might be one of our biggest, but we'll see.
Yeah, it's definitely, we did not really check our ambition too much with this title. It's still very much a linear story. That's like kind of crucial to the kind of storytelling we're after with this game. But I think you can see in the demo, just like when you look at just geographically the options that are in front of the player. I mean, the way the demo works is, it's just one possible playthrough through this pretty vast space. So with The Last of Us 1, kind of again, our catchphrase was wide linear, and we're pushing that even more this time. So I think if you look at the demo, you can kind of realize like, oh, the player didn't have to go this way; they could have gone that way instead. I think it becomes kind of obvious of the width and the options that are available to the player.
And I think also too, just blurring the lines between what is considered a combat space and what is like an exploration space, and that feeling you get sometimes in games of just like, oh, here's the combat area. We wanted every place to feel like it could have combat in it, and that there's always a threat somewhere. So that, again, that seamlessness kind of transitions into our layout philosophy as well, where you kind of have a bunch of options and different ways to escape and things.
Now, I'm making big assumptions here, but from the gameplay demo I saw last night, it felt like the AI was a lot smarter. I mean, like Ellie being noticed under the car, for example, was terrifying to me, because in my video game brain, I'm like, that's a safe space. So how have no, it's not.
No safe space, yeah.
So how have you guys evolved the AI?
And there's a bunch of stuff that we've done under the hood that's probably like technical, not that interesting to talk about, but we're definitely pursuing a lot of communication between the AI. So in the first game, there were a lot of situations where as soon as one enemy spotted you, they kind of had this like, telepathic awareness and kind of everybody kind of knew where you were. So one thing you can see in the demo is that when they discover the body in the forest, the first person that you kill, like there's like kind of this awareness that like ripples out. Like they use this system of whistling to kind of communicate with each other, and gradually like more and more people know about your location. And when the reinforcements arrive, that the ill-fated Ethan, you see this kind of like moment of communication as they sync up with each other, and that's something we're definitely pursuing, is kind of like this knowledge propagation of like this group knows about you, this group doesn't, and a real communication between those people.
systemic check-ins to get information, and just also just the way that the most important state of the AI in my mind for this game is the search and how they search an environment, and there was such a big investment of tech in The Last of Us 1, and we've again just kind of rethinking that whole thing and just how do we get, adding the ability to check underneath. We now have prone, so the AI has to expand to accommodate for prone, so they have to know to look under stuff and pull you out and engage you. So yeah, there's a lot of stuff that just all these new mechanics that we've added, the AI has to account for. We can't just flip switch and it works. So it's a lot of work and it's exciting.
Yeah, I mean, very much so. Enemy types. So we saw last night humans. Are we going to see the infected as well? Is this world still infected? Are they still a threat?
Is there still infected in the game?
Very much so. And actually, we're expanding the infected gameplay space quite a bit as well. Can we say there's some new classes? There's some new classes. And it all has to, everything has to work well to get integrated into the narrative. We can't just willy-nilly act. Everything we're doing is we're trying to keep the world grounded and believable. It all make logical sense. And we feel like that's how we can best immerse the player in this journey. But yes, very much the infected are a real threat, not only to Ellie, but to all these other factions that Ellie faces against.
Okay, well, let's talk about crafting.
Sure.
What's new with crafting?
Well, probably the biggest single new feature is to be able to craft ammo. So in the first game, you were able to upgrade your melee weapons, and in this game, you're able to craft different arrow types as well. So we saw Ellie use the bomb arrow to great effect.
That was sick, by the way. That was my favorite part of the demo.
And just in general, as Kurt was mentioning before, we're looking to push everything, to take everything to the next level. But with each new crafting item that we add, we're looking to fill a pretty distinct gameplay niche. So Last of Us is in a world with a lot of RPGs, a lot of grenade launchers, so we needed kind of something that was a long-range splash damage mechanic, and so that kind of is what suggested the explosive arrow. So every kind of new element we add, we're really focused on having a lot of elegance, having few mechanics that deliver a lot of options that really increase the dimensionality of the gameplay space.
That's a really important point. Is when we first start the project, we make this huge list of here are all the crazy things Ellie can craft. And then actually now a lot of the work is stripping stuff away, combining items, how do we make it as simple and digestible as possible so you can, on the fly, quickly make choices and you're not just inundated with the long list of things to choose from.
The huge menu and stuff, yeah.
Okay, well, we've got a limited amount of time, so I want to start on story. Where do we open in The Last of Us Part 2? We ended in Jackson. Where is she when we open?
Where the game opens?
Yeah. Where's she at?
Well, let's just say where the demo opens. The game opens maybe somewhere different. But we're in Jackson. So this is the same place Joel and Ellie spoiler alert, where Joel and Ellie have ended at the end of the first game. That's where we are now 4 years later, if my math is right. And we see that now Ellie is part of this community. She's part of these patrols to keep Jackson safe. And she has this relationship with Dina and her friend Jesse.
Okay, so who is this? Tell me about this new faction. I've got a word written down here. Seraphites. Is that the correct pronunciation?
Seraphites. So that's the religious group we showed off at the Paris cutscene, the hanging cutscene, and that's the same group that Ellie faces against in Seattle.
Right. So they're the bad guys.
Right. So they are bad guys, good guys. It's all relative in the world of The Last of Us. We really try to humanize everybody, to say everybody has a real objective. They're trying to keep themselves safe. How do we humanize them? Right now you're seeing one aspect of them, so they might come off as, okay, these are the bad, cultish people. But there's a lot more dimension and complexity to them that you'll explore when you play the final game. Okay, so tell me more about this community that Ellie is part of. What's her life in Jackson like? It's kind of normal. She gets to, they go to a festival, they have electricity, you get to have friends, you get to party, they sometimes watch movies, and then bad shit goes down. Is that that's where we're going to end that? I mean, the big question on everyone's lips
is Joel, right? So he's missing, but he's mentioned. He's called Ellie's old man. So where is Joel at this point in time?
It's called suspense, Lucy.
Well, first of all, you're assuming they're talking about Joel. It could be some other father figure that came in the 4 years. It's Joel. It's Joel. We're talking about Joel. It's Joel. So he's somewhere there in Jackson. Yeah, he's somewhere out there.
Okay, so he's somewhere out there. That's all we're gonna. That's all we're gonna get.
That's all you're gonna get. Right
Okay,
now.
that's fair. That's fair. Let's move on to new characters then. So last night we were introduced to Jesse and Dina. Who are they, and what kind of a role do they play in Ellie's life?
So they're all part of this. Like everyone in Jackson has a role. These three characters. How they contribute to the community. They go on these patrols outside of town to make sure there are no infected coming in, no other marauders. Jesse is kind of the leader of this group, so you hear that Joel's kind of harassing him about making sure he's safe whenever Ellie goes out. And as soon as, I don't know if I'm revealing too much, whatever. As soon as Ellie and Joel settled in Jackson, Ellie and Dina have hit it off. And at the time, Dina was girlfriends with Jesse, but they've been best friends ever since until this night.
Right.
At the demo.
Okay, well, I actually think that, we should pause for a second because I really want to get inside the heads of these characters and really who better to talk about them than the actors who play them. So I'd just love to hear a big round of applause for Shannon Woodward, who plays Dina, and Ashley Johnson, who is our Ellie. Woo! Welcome. It is so good to see you guys here.
It's good to be here. Hi, everybody.
Now, how did you both feel after last night?
Excited?
Yeah, excited, and of course, before, nervous, just...
It's a good thing you're not nervous now. It's a good thing.
What?
It's a good thing you're not nervous now.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, we've been keeping it under wraps for so long. It was like I felt like I had Stockholm syndrome. Even after the feed went, I was like, wait, am I allowed to say that I'm in the game still? And they were like, yes. I was like, but are you sure? So yeah, really excited.
Ashley, Ellie's been through a lot since you first started playing her. When did you first when did you first start as Ellie? Was that 2011 or?
That sounds right.
Yeah.
2010?
Yeah.
I think it's maybe 2010.
I think it was 2010.
Yeah.
Which is when I first auditioned for the part.
Right.
And then, so I've been in this character's shoes for a long time now. So she's very near and dear.
So you saw her fighting last night, and it was pretty vicious. I think we can all agree. For me, I was like, oh my God, these poor NPCs, they're really suffering.
Yeah.
How did you feel sort of watching that combat and seeing how evolved she's become as a fighter?
Yeah, that was something that we've been talking about and was sort of I don't want to say a concern, but something, that I was, to have a young female sort of doing all of the combat, you want to make it believable, and I think they did such a fantastic job with it where, figuring out, with range weapons, and it's exciting to me, and I think they sort of figured out a perfect balance of how Ellie would fight and being her size, and she's extremely capable, and I think that's pretty badass.
Shannon, tell us about how you came aboard this project.
Well, it was really desperate. Oh, you laugh now. So Hallie Gross, who works on the game with Neil, actually wrote on Westworld the first season, and so we were friendly. And we were at a social event of some kind at some point when we were on hiatus, and I was like, what are you up to? And she's like, oh, I'm actually, I'm writing at Naughty Dog. I was like, the video game company? And she was like, yeah. And I was like, what are you doing at Naughty Dog, writing the Schmastabus Schmoo? And they hadn't announced the game yet. And she was like, no, I'm not allowed to talk about it. And I was like, oh my God, you are? It's okay. I won't tell anybody. That's awesome. And I was like, that's my favorite game. I'm obsessed with it. And I like made a joke about like how I would like die to have a line in the game, and she was like, "Oh, I'll tell Neil." And I was like, "Oh, okay, but you don't have to. I just like I'm a big fan." And it kind of like went back and forth, and like 6 months later, she eventually was like, "Well, there's a role, but you'd have to audition." And I was like, "I act like every day. I'm not afraid of that." And then I auditioned a couple times, and then I ended up here, and I'm still very excited about it.
I told when Ellie came up to me and said, "Yeah, this actress Shannon, she's like a fan of the game. Can she come to audition?" I'm like, "Oh, sure, yeah, we'll check it out." And it was like the worst audition day because the electricity went out, so we had to like rehearse in the kitchen. All the milk is spoiling, so it just stinks. There's helicopters outside. Ashley was unavailable,
And
so
I was like 40 minutes
we brought in
late.
like
car
Laura.
went off the freeway.
We brought in Laura Bailey to read as Ellie for the scene, and after it's this really emotional scene. And after we were done, I just looked at Ellie. I was like, "What the hell?" Like that was one of the best auditions I've ever seen.
Yes.
And I was like,
Thanks, guys.
you know what? Just to torture her, let's bring her in for round 2. And then she did another set of scenes with Ashley just to make sure they had the chemistry. And it's really awesome to see these two together. They have a ton of chemistry.
So it wasn't the spoiled milk that made her act so well. That was like.
I think we're just trying to get out of it. Just sign her like.
Added a lot of tension. Yeah, it was. We got to in the second round. We got to audition together, and
She already had the job, to be fair.
who knows? Yeah, and she was so just fantastic. Like so many amazing actors came in, but we definitely did have chemistry from the get-go, and she's just challenges me to be a better actor, and it was just like
Nice.
it was awesome. Yeah, I'm stoked.
So sweet.
Yeah.
It was so fun. I was just like, even if they don't hire me, they're gonna let me pretend to be in this for like 25 minutes, and I'm gonna really go for it. Because you know what? Sometimes you get to read for really cool things, and like that's the thing you have to just enjoy. Is like somebody's gonna let me do this, and they're gonna watch me do it for like 15 minutes, even if I bomb. Great story if you do. I'm very glad it didn't go that way for me this time.
Well, Shannon, a lot of people know you. Most people know you as Elsie from Westworld. What's the fan reaction been like for you?
I don't know. I don't leave my house much. You have to ask them. What do you guys? You guys liking it? Thanks. They seem excited.
Sounds like it's been very positive. All right, I want to talk about that. Let's talk about that scene. I mean, you guys talk about chemistry. There was a lot of chemistry in that scene last night. Now, where does this scene take place? It's in a church. Where is it? Where are we?
Yeah, so we're in Jackson. They
Yeah.
have these events. They have parties. This is one of those situations where they have they're having this town celebration. People can come in, relax, eat, dance, and that's where these two dance.
Okay, tell me about shooting this scene.
First of all, I did really do that dance at the beginning.
That is true.
Several
Yeah.
days of rehearsal.
One of the first things that Shannon had to do, we brought her in with a dance choreographer and learned this whole crazy routine. It was like a 3-minute thing, and we used 5 seconds of it.
I was exhausted every time. It was like running in circles and anyway. So yeah. Then there's
No, it's
another
because in the
dance.
scene there are dozens of characters, but we can only do, I forget the number. It's 8 or 9 characters at a time. So we had to have this whole dance troupe that came in. We had to shoot a chunk. Okay, there's going to be this corner, and then we're going to shoot another chunk of this corner, and another chunk of this corner. Then a separate day we brought in people with kids and kids running around. We had to shoot that. Then another day we brought our actors in to shoot the dramatic stuff. So and then we all to stitch it all together to make it seem seamless and full and full of life. And when we did that was a year ago.
It was a year ago.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So
it was a long
crazy.
time ago.
That is pretty
It's the
crazy.
best, the longest secret I ever kept.
I mean, for me, I mentioned this to a lot of people last night. It was the first video game kiss I think I've ever seen where I haven't gone, oh, that's a little bit weird. It's a little bit uncanny valley. I'm a little bit weirded out by it all. It just seemed really, really natural. It felt really natural. It looked really natural.
Hey.
We were actually just talking about, what was it, Crafty?
Yeah.
She was like, we're out of mac and cheese. And I was like, no.
I mean, let's talk about the performance capture techniques that you're using this time around.
Yeah, so we have facial capture this time around. It's a more advanced version of what we had even on Uncharted 4, more complicated rigs for faces. But the problem you have when you have an intimate scene like this is you have these cameras in front of you, so two actors can't get close.
It is so awkward.
If we get our
we'll get to the awkward part.
cameras
We'll get to
Okay,
the
okay,
awkward
okay,
part.
okay.
So first, when we're going to shoot this scene, we're like, okay, let's just get the most natural performance we can, as much as you can in like a white room that looks like an insane asylum when you're wearing like these crazy suits. So we took the cameras off and we said, let's just get the best reference footage we can for our animators. We were lucky that we have like amazing, super talented animators at Naughty Dog. So we shot it that way. They kissed. We did a few takes. And, you know, that's a little awkward. And then we're like, okay, but our animators like something to start with. Can we get some performance on the face? So let's put the cameras back on. And then they have to like get really close and then turn to the side and pretend to kiss each other, even though they're just kissing the air. And they love that part.
It's our favorite part. We try to like put our cheeks so they touch, so it felt like kind of like intimacy. We were just like, and I'm like, don't look, do not look.
Yeah, so a little awkward.
Did you make the noises? I just want to know if you made the
No,
noises.
but it's sort of one of those things too when you get close because they're both in the same position for both people. So sometimes you're trying to stay in the moment, and then it's like clank, 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 clank.
Yeah, they click.
And then you kind of have to like unhook and then sort of
Yeah, then
rearrange
your
the
cables
camera.
get tangled. These
We
suits have
stick to
Velcro.
each
You get
other.
stuck to each other.
Yeah.
Yeah, my hands kept getting, they wrapped them because they kept getting stuck on her.
That's right.
This is easily the most intense and also hysterical still from anything I've ever seen. It just really has so much duality. Yeah, there was a lot of sticking, and we'd be in the middle of it, and I'd be like, I'm stuck. Do we have to start again? Or?
And they gave an amazing performance, but I also have to give a lot of credit to our animators that have kind of set with that reference footage and had to touch things, and like our riggers have to develop whole new tech for the face, and you see like the way Ellie nose squishes and the cheeks move against each other. That's all tech that we didn't have before, just to be able to create a scene like that.
I mean, I did notice that Ellie does look a little bit more like Ashley this time around, and obviously that was on purpose. And tell me about how you've evolved that look.
So we have Soa, one of our lead character modelers. She did a pass on taking Ellie from the first game and then aging her up. And then at the same time, we created a digital double for Ashley, just so we can really get as close of a performance as we can to what Ashley does. And then we did a blend where we took, I think, 40% of Ashley's face with this model that was crafted from scratch. And that's the Ellie we've ended up with. So we're saying as she's aging, we're taking more of like Ashley's characteristics, and that gives us a much more natural, nuanced performance.
How does that feel for you?
It's it's weird. It's weird watching it because I think it's my lips and stuff, and so whenever I watch it, I feel like covering part of my face because I don't know. It's weird. I mean, it's really cool. I think they've done such a beautiful job with it. I mean, the skin and it looks so beautiful. I'm not like complimenting myself. I'm like, I don't mean that.
You can compliment yourself.
60%
I don't mean that. Yeah. The 60% is on point.
But yeah, the tech that has gone into the characters is absolutely extraordinary. Where like we had this like incredibly technical programmer, like one of our top minds at the studio, who spent months redoing our eyeballs, and now like the eyeballs are fully refractive. They have like internal reflections that get that like kind of sparkle in the eye and stuff. So all of this stuff that is like very subtle but really creates this nuanced, natural appearance, and it's a lot of tech. It's like the synergy. It's the cocktail of the tech and the performance.
I don't think we could have picked a harder scene to do with like this highly detailed characters with hair and like bokeh blurred out lights behind it that like highlights from behind, and just like the hardest thing to do in a video game is like,
Yeah, like
transparent hair with.
This is super nerdy, but like, yeah, sorting things that have alpha mask is really difficult, and trying to do it with like Dina especially has all these like curly hair and flyaways, which I'm familiar with, Frizz. It's really hard to render, but our team of really talented people pulled it off.
All right, of course I have to ask because I think I'll be murdered if and I know the answer. What's the release date? What's what?
So we're going to disappoint people. We've learned our lesson. We're not going to say the release date until we're very close to release. So we're not very close to release is the only thing we'll say.
Fair. Look, finally, I just want to thank you all so much. And I also just want to thank you on behalf of the LGBTQ community as well for actually being so bold and putting that out there on the E3 stage. I thought was one of the bravest things I've ever seen. And yeah, I'm getting a bit choked up just talking about it. So thank you. And yeah, we're really, really excited to see what you're going to bring out next. That's it. That's all we've got time for. Thank you so much, everyone. Neil, Anthony, Kurt, Shannon, Ashley.
Thanks, guys.
It's been an absolute pleasure, and thank you. Have a good
Cool.
E3.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks.